And we start the 24th edition of the show, almost up to the quarter century. Welcome, listeners. It's so lovely to see you. And we have a very exciting addition to the team today. As you know, Laura is off and certainly won't be back before Christmas, we don't think. We wish her very well and hope she gets better soon. But what we've decided to do is we're bringing in a guest lady. Now, when I say that, sort of Samantha sort of grimaces. I'm not allowed to call ladies. So, that's what happens when you're old. So then today we're welcoming Vonnie. It's so lovely of you to be with us. Thank you for the honour of coming to be with us. Tell us something about yourself, Vonnie. Who are you and where are you from and what do you do and anything else you want to share?
Well, I'm Vonnie. I'm a Labour member from North West Durham. I'm currently the LGBT plus officer there, but I'm also an activist and an officer in the National Education Union as well. So I do probably more activism in the union than the Labour Party at present.
And now this North West Durham, that used to be Laura Pidcock's stomping ground, didn't it? And you've got a new MP now.
We do have a new MP, yes.
Well, you may share something about him on your moment of the week. It's just great to have you here. Thank you really a lot. And so let's just say hey. Let's just say hi to our other the dream team. Paul, say hello.
Hello there. Stuart,
say hello.
Hello.
Without grimacing, Samantha, say hello.
Hello.
Like that's lovely. That's right. Samantha's comment when Vonnie was on the show is, "I'm not." Which Smurf did you call it? You're not. So I'm no longer Smurfette. So that's wonderful. Okay. Moment of the week. I'm going to leave you rudely until later. I'll start with Paul.
I was just going to do this.
Oh no! Every time I forget that.
We've got jingles. We might as well use them.
Yes, I know. Paul, go first anyway.
My moment of the week is it's based on bullying and the idea that in April, apparently, the report on Priti Patel's bullying, we don't have to say alleged anymore because she did bully someone from the civil service, was on Boris Johnson's desk in April. And he bizarrely decided to release it in Anti-Bullying Week. And everyone, let's support the Pritster. So they released it in Anti-Bullying Week, basically kind of, I don't know, maybe, is there any logic behind that? To kind of undermine the whole idea that bullying is a thing? I know. Actually, I didn't witness that and I didn't experience that myself, so therefore it didn't happen. And everyone's saying she's such a great person. So yeah, really interesting to see that our Home Secretary is not only someone who allegedly tried to give our foreign aid budget to another nation's military and lost her job for that, but also is a bully.
They also chose, rather bizarrely as well, to release, I can't remember what the fund was, whether it was for, I think it was for sort of homophobic and transphobic bullying. There used to be a fund in schools to help teachers.
Yeah.
And sort of they stopped this in March, but it was this week, Anti-Bullying Week, that they chose to announce that they'd stop that fund as well. And everybody's up now. Do you think they just, are they doing it because they're incompetent or because they're taunting or because they just...
Maybe there's someone in the civil service who releases these things, like, the person who sent the Truth Twister tweet, maybe, but it's all going to be a conspiracy theory, isn't it? Like, we don't know what's happening. We just know that these things are awful and they're coming out at the worst possible times. And people don't seem to care as much as they should about these things because people are busy trying to just get by and live their lives.
I think that's a wise comment. Stuart, moment of the week.
Mine is one that I saw this morning, and it was that Matt Hancock and his department had a bill for 44 grand at a takeaway called from Bong Bong Manila Canteen for 44 grand for his department.
For takeaways.
Yeah, just that one restaurant, mind. This isn't it like anywhere else. This is 44 grand at a single restaurant. Since
Did you read what he said when he was confronted by it?
I did. He said that it was absolutely right that he was feeding people who were working hard.
That's
But
right.
obviously,
Nothing wrong with feeding people. This is from the cabinet that tried to stop holiday meals for children. The whole thing, we just back to the thing that you know, if you wrote this in a play, people would say that would never happen. What he did, that's not realistic at all. This is unbelievable fiction. This is so. Vonnie, sort of, come on, sort of always nice sort of to get a fresh idea. What's your moment of the week?
Well, my moment of the week is what on earth is going on with my MP, because obviously I'm North West Durham and we no longer have the lovely Laura, we now have Richard Holden. So Richard Holden has been either unfeasibly stupid or incredibly badly judged. I don't know what's going on with him this week. So anyway, he decided he would jump in on the love in on Priti Patel that Paul was talking about, but at the end of it told anyone who disagreed with him to bugger off, which was quite nice as a constituent. I love being told to bugger off by my MP. And then today he's been tweeting and celebrating, taking credit for the government going to test domiciliary care workers once a week, which actually he voted against in June. So I don't quite know what's going on with him. And then to top it off, the Daily Mail are having a pop at Boris Johnson and Richard Holden in a story. And I don't normally read the Daily Mail. I only actually read this article.
Come on, we found you out, Vonnie.
No, I didn't.
Your street cred is totally destroyed.
So a few years ago, Richard Holden was charged with sexual assault and he was found not guilty. We all knew that last year when we campaigned against him. We never used that in the campaign because he was found not guilty. So, but now the Daily Mail have scraped this up and are trying to link it to Carrie Simons, who gave evidence against him, and saying that Boris Johnson is blocking him from more senior roles because Carrie Simons doesn't like him. And they've even quoted a government source, you know, one of those unnamed sources in the Daily Mail, is even quoted as Boris saying I've heard he's a bad man. So it's So my moment of the week is several moments that mean it's not a good week for Richard Holden.
Richard Holden is a very aggressive person, and he's got his teeth into the county council on a number of occasions. And sort of he's sort of normally the Tories in County Durham are very quiet, jolly people who smile sort of when you have a pop at the Tories and sort of make excuses and often agree with you. Well, we don't quite agree with what they're doing, but there's a new breed of Tory around and they're very, very aggressive. And the answer to most things is, well, it would have been worse under Corbyn. And sort of, but some of the things they do and say horrifies you. Sam, thank you, Bonnie. That's a sort of Sam, moment of the week. Have you got something to say about your MP? You said nice things about your MP last week.
I do try to say this is actually about another Conservative candidate. As you and I know, but many people watching this may not know, as well as all of the council elections next year, we've also got the police and crime commissioner elections. And of course, we've got our candidate out there, Joy Allen. She's already collecting surveys and things, trying to understand what people want. And
Sam, sorry, I always interrupt you and I will stop doing it. But the fact of the matter is that she's also running a very powerful campaign against this plan to just have one custody suite in the centre of in Spennymoor, where people have got to come from Peterlee if they arrest somebody, and that's what we just never arrest them.
So I mean, that's where I found this piece of information. The Conservatives, because the Conservative MPs also have written to the acting PCC about this, all on the same lines as Joy, saying, you know, we already have trouble with police response times. Do we really have time to be bussing people into Spennymoor from Darlington and from Peterlee to a custody suite? So they were forced to unveil their police and crime commissioner candidate so he could stand alongside them in this letter. So I looked him up, as you would do, and he's called George, and this section, he's got a very sparse website, but this section just, it says, George is proud to have served his country and his party by standing as a candidate in high-profile, albeit unwinnable elections in every region of the country. And he has stood for election in the Welsh Assembly, in the Northern Ireland Assembly, in the Westminster parliamentary election, in Mansfield, in Doncaster, and I think he lives in Darlington. I mean, I just think this is such an insult to all of those people who voted Conservative in the last election. Like, they're not even putting up genuine candidates for, I mean, they could win this. The turnout for the Police and Crime Commissioner is usually under 28% because people don't really understand what it is. You know, I think if they really wanted to, they could win that election, and they're not even trying. I just think it is an insult to the people who've recently turned to them for support.
What happens, and I can speak from experience, is they put up these paper candidates who don't expect to win. They canvass a few streets, and then suddenly they find themselves in position and they don't know what to do with the job that they've been given. And they didn't really want it anyway.
Mm.
So you're absolutely right. You need to be careful who you vote for. Right. Thank you very much indeed for your moment of the week, everybody. And I've remembered this time, Paul. Now it's time for.
Now it's time for the big story.
Now, what we do, people, is we have a poll and everybody votes. And if you join Political Unmuted, you can vote as well. And this is the story that everybody wanted us to discuss. And I don't think there's much to discuss at all. I think we're just going to hear 4 explosions of rage. But I may be wrong. So the thing that you wanted people to talk about is the pay freeze for public sector workers. And and I said to the team, who wants to lead on this? And Samantha said, I want to lead on this. And this was entirely selfish and self-serving, because she knows damn well that when she's spoken, nobody else will have anything more to add to it. There'll be nothing. There'll be nobody saying, no, you're wrong there. It's right that these people get a pay freeze. Sam, kick off.
Yes, you're right. There's nobody on this panel who's going to say that we should be freezing public pay. I had a phone call. So the story is that on Wednesday, sorry, I got an itchy eye. And I've got sharp nails, so I'm going to end up blinding myself. On Wednesday, Dishi Rishi, is a name that I never give him, but everybody else seems to, is going to do a mini budget. And as part of that mini budget, he is going to propose a public sector pay freeze. And I had a phone call about this with another one of my town councillors in Shildon yesterday. I was in the car, just going to pick up bloody chicken food, and she rang us. And we were just saying, you know, actually, when you look around yourself and you look at the effects of austerity lumped on top of the effects of the industrial decline that happened under Thatcher's government, and now we're going to have the effects of the coronavirus pandemic lumped on top of that. And we know that each one of those steps was a political decision that has left our high streets emptier than high streets down south, and our you know, offers for youth centres and things a lot worse than they are elsewhere, and that's, it's just getting to, I mean, I know that we're all very emotional about this anyway, we're all very passionate about this anyway, but it just feels so hopeless, one thing after another, like every generation's got a new reason for the Tories to heap all of the suffering on the people who have the least. And it's just so infuriating knowing that it does not have to be this way. It's because they don't want to up taxes for the people who earn more, because they're their friends and they're their funders. So yeah, obviously, no, I do not think we should be freezing pay, for which is cutting pay, isn't it? When you've got inflation and then you've got pay that doesn't grow, that's cutting pay, because you can buy less things with the money that you get. I don't think we should be freezing pay for those people that we stood out on our doorsteps every Thursday and clapped for during the height of the pandemic. You know, we have proven that these are the people who are the key workers, not the hedge fund managers and not the, you know, whatever else. I don't even have a vocabulary for these kinds of jobs, because they just offer so little to us. So no, give pay rises to the nurses and the teachers and the lollipop ladies, for God's sake.
Thank you. Bonnie, desperately unfair, sort of, just...
There's no real words to say how unfair this is. I mean, obviously, I know more about teachers' pay than I do about other public sector roles, but I know, obviously, this affects teachers as well. And I kind of looked at this and I thought, well, I qualified as a teacher in 2010. I trained as a mature student and came into teaching as, you know, as a new career. And we had year after year after year of pay freeze. And then we had the last few years, we've had 1% until I think it was it last year was the first year we got above 1%. But I don't work in the classroom now, so that's irrelevant to me. But it makes, despite the fact that a lot of public sector workers, because of austerity, are already on below, have already lost money over the last 10 years. It doesn't make any sense economically. And I've seen loads of things on the internet about, well, private sector doesn't get paid as well as public sector and all of this rubbish. Actually, if public sector workers have less money, they're going to spend less money in the private sector. So our private sector businesses, hospitality and leisure and gyms, they're all struggling anyway. So all that's going to happen is a sector of the population is going to have even less money to spend. So I'm not even sure what the financial logic is behind it. It's an absolute disgrace. It makes no sense economically. Plus, the Tories are actually breaking an election pledge here as well. They said that by 2022, newly qualified teachers would be starting on £30,000 a year in a bid to try and get people to train to be teachers. We're at 2020, some of these people are already at university with that career choice, thinking they're going to start at an entry level of 30,000. Well, they're not with this pay freeze. You know, so it's kind of like they're breaking a manifesto pledge as well. It's just...
Ronnie, we just come back to that thing that I said, why are they sort of doing this? I mean, it just is indescribably stupid. These are the heroes of the pandemic, and they've decided that they're going to make them pay for the pandemic they nursed us through. I mean, what is going on in the government's mind, do you think?
I'm trying to think. My partner, my wife, came up with a beautiful like allegory today about this, because we were talking about this, and she says they don't care. The Conservative government do not care. I'm trying not to swear here very hard, about people working, because they know people will still vote for them, because they've proved that. The kind of example she made, which is not one I would have picked, but I'm going to share it anyway, was that it's like pigs voting to be in the bacon slicer. You know, that's what she says. People are going to keep voting for them because they've proved that, and they genuinely the average person in the street, the Tory government couldn't care less about. We're just a unit of, we're just someone who's there to make money for their mates. Ultimately, we're not actually people. They don't care about us as individuals and how well we're doing. And I think all of this just proves it. Every decision they make proves that more and more and more.
Stuart, thank you, Rami. Stuart, I mean, there is this theory, isn't there, that if you are middle class and wealthy, then you are motivated by the prospect of more wealth. But if you're poor and badly paid, then you are motivated by the prospect of losing what you got. I mean, do you think that this is targeted at the poor intentionally, at the public sector intentionally, or do you think it's just that a disconnected government has thought, my God, we've got to pay for all this. We've poured billions into the economy to survive. We have to start to clear this debt, and sort of we're going to have to start by cutting expenditure. Where do we cut the expenditure? Well, the huge public sector, and we've got to take money out of that, and the obvious place is by cutting wages. I mean, sort of, do you think there's any logic behind the decision?
I mean, they always target the weakest link, and public sector workers often don't have anyone else to work for but the government. It's not as if, firefighters can get up and go to a private firefighting company and get a better deal. They can't, they are in a weakened position because of it. And when you use the term, public sector workers in the Houses of Commons, and it's such a blanket term, people don't really pick up on the idea that it's, somebody down your street, or it's, your neighbor, your family member. They just, it's this big spend that we need to get under control, and it's not. This is really damaging to lots of people. I mean, literally, since March 23rd, these people have been dying for us. They've been our front line, and now we're saying you're not worthwhile. It's an incredible betrayal again, as it always is. And we're already seeing the Tories kind of maneuver into position where they know that they are going to betray these people next week, that many of them are putting out statements that they don't want their MPs pay a rise, knowing that they're going to use the logic, well, I didn't get one, so they shouldn't get one. And it's disgusting. These people have literally, bled for us. Families are being torn to bits for us, and we're not going to pay them, the pennies in reality. It is to make these people's lives worth living. It's disgusting.
You see, that it's the old thing, isn't it? That sort of 1% of a very small amount is minuscule. Sort of 4% of a huge salary is actually quite a lot. And sort of, I mean, we pay these people in percentages, not in absolute sums as well. And it's difficult enough getting by as it is without taking a real wage. But I had to laugh when you said sort of they know that they're going to have to keep working. Sort of when I started, this is nothing relevant to it at all, but when I started working, an older teacher took me on one side and he said, "John, I want to tell you this." And so I said, "Yes." He said, the first day I started teaching, I realized I couldn't do it. And the second day, I realized I couldn't do anything else. So I've been stuck here ever since. He retired, that was his story. So there is this sense, I was talking about your options for manoeuvring come down, and yes, perhaps it is because they've got a captive audience who are dependent on them, that they know they can take no care of them, and they'll have to put up with it. Maybe that's got to do with it. Paul, the MPs, they're going to give themselves a 4.5% pay rise, aren't they?
Yeah, they've done it before as well. They've given themselves a 10% pay rise in the past. And if you look at the kind of what's happened since austerity was in, they were actually quite reserved with it from 2010 to 2015, until they got a Tory majority, and then they gave themselves a 10% pay rise in 2015 to make up for, like, you know, not getting a big pay rise between 2010 and 2015. But there's a couple of people making sounds about it, like people who maybe it's quite easy, isn't it, if you've got like 16 houses to get an income from, to not worry about a couple of grand pay rise. So like you kind of virtue signal and say, oh, I don't want this pay rise that I know that we're going to like nod through anyway, and I'll still vote for the whip when yeah, I'll still, you know, but I'll say that I was against it, even though a month ago I said, actually, it's not up to us. It's not our decision at all. It's not the government's choice. It's an independent body. But like, who appoints the independent body, and who passes the laws in this country that make it legal for you to take the recommendation of that body? So quite, I don't know. I just find the whole thing really, really hypocritical.
What about the Labour Party? I mean, sort of as a county councillor, I can say that the county councillors have rejected a pay rise since 2009. They haven't taken an increase in their allowance, haven't the county councillors, since 2009. It's still exactly the level it was when they started off the unitary authority in 2009. The MPs have just upped it every time. Why do you think the Labour MPs are not calling time on this? Surely, I mean, even sort of as a political sort of thingy, sort of trick, a political vote winner, the Labour Party could stand up and say, we're going to vote against this. It's going to go through anyway. They're still going to get it. I mean, sort of, but they could make a stand and say, a stand of principle. This seems to be something lost on the Labour Party, Parliamentary Labour Party at the moment. They can make a stand of principle and say, why don't the Labour Party say no?
Well, can I make a suggestion on that? Is that actually it's a really anti-Labour Party thing to do, because if you do reduce, I'm not saying right now that the MP should have their pay rise, and I'm definitely not. I believe that MPs' pay should be linked to the median average pay of the country, so that it's kind of performance related. But as it stands, right, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys, right? But also, if you don't pay people enough to do the job, only rich people will be able to do the job. And we have a real problem at the moment where it's not accessible at all to become an MP. My friend makes the example of herself. She's a single mother. It will be incredibly difficult for a single mother to access the job of being an MP, being incredibly difficult for anybody who has a disability to access the job of being an MP, because you've got to travel down to London still, and you've got to go to the House of Commons, which is not a very disability accessible building, and all of this stuff. So I do think we should pay MPs who essentially do 2 full-time jobs as an MP in Parliament and a constituency MP. Saying that, yes, obviously this time it is obscene and wrong that people who are being paid less doing good things on the ground and our MPs are going to be paid more.
Thank you for that very balanced comment. Paul, did you just quickly do you have anything to say to finish off?
I was just going to say, Nadia Whittome has, I believe, taken half the pay. She's taken half the pay of an MP. She's taken a worker's salary, she's calling it, to make a stand on this one. But there is, as Samantha was saying, there is that kind of, it's a thing about accessibility, but it depends what you do, and it depends why you do it. Like years and years ago, the only people who could afford to be in Parliament were the rich. And that's why you'd have like people getting out of like stage coaches and stuff like that in top hats. And this is why, like, if you look back at that video, there's a video of Jeremy Corbyn years ago where they call him Scruffy because he's wearing a jumper. And he's like, well, you know, I'm not here. I'm not here to dress up. I'm here to represent the people that I work for, which is my constituents. It depends how you think of yourself. I think people often talk about things like ideology, like an ideology is a bad thing. They'll always say, oh, look at those ideological left-wingers. They've got an ideology. I've got an ideology, and my ideology is to make sure that everyone has a better life. And if you work together, everything can improve if everyone works together towards a common goal. And some people, like, you know, may have to put in a bit more if they've got more, and some people might need a bit more put into them if they've got. That's my ideology. However, the ideology of the Tories is small state, small public sector, and give a lot of wealth to the private sector. We have seen that, as Vonnie said, this is entirely economically illiterate, because if you pay the public sector less, then there'll be less money to go around in there. And what we've seen is we've got this like deficit that's grown and grown and grown. And as the deficit has grown, so has the bank balance that is in the Cayman Islands for billionaires. So billionaires are putting all this money tax-free offshore, and that is where the deficit is going. A deficit can either end up in the pockets of people, or it can end up in the pockets of billionaires, who are people, but there are a lot fewer of them. Okay, so they're still humans, you know.
Dragons.
So, well, yeah, you know, in a sense. You know, it can end up in one of those two places. A deficit in itself isn't a bad thing. It just means the difference between the amount of money the government creates and the amount of tax you pay. And as long as inflation doesn't get out of hand, you're absolutely fine. If that money goes into the pockets of people, that money will be spent in the economy. So that means those people who like offer services or whatever, you know, or you know, make things or, you know, sell things, they'll all be better off as well. Because if you give people who don't have much money a bit of money to spend, they will spend it. As it stands at the moment, poorer people are going to have to pay for this crisis, just like they paid for the 2008 financial crash, and which Rishi Sunak, who was mentioned at the beginning of this, actually was involved in one of the teams that triggered the crash. Now, this was a long-running practice, but right at the very end, and I'm sure he was involved in those long-running practices, but right at the very end, one of the things that pushed us over the edge, Rishi Sunak's team was part of that. Now he's in charge of the country, and their ideology is lots of money for the private sector, everyone else, fight it out amongst yourselves.
Well, they certainly dished it out to the public sector workers this time, and I think the world can see it's unfair. It's how long before they click on. Ladies and gentlemen, we've discussed that at length. That was what you asked us to do, but you know what happens now. And we have no jingle for this, so I'm not going to be embarrassed by Paul. But sort of the fact is that this time we welcome our guest candidate. We bring them out of the waiting room. But today, I don't need to, because our guest candidate is Stuart Sutherland, who isn't a guest at all, but he is a candidate. And Stuart, it's lovely to welcome you wearing a different hat. And congratulations, you've gone on the panel and you're going to stand somewhere to become a candidate. So we ask the same questions to everybody, and the fact that we know you and love you isn't going to change those questions. But my question that I ask every time is why do you want to be a Durham County Councillor?
So many reasons. Obviously, it's to get into arguments with people over the internet. I think it's the important one. No, there's lots of things I want to change, and there's lots of people I want to help. I think the toolkit of a county councillor is something that would be really useful on my mission to try and help these people. It's a really incredible platform to really get some change and to activate some stuff for the community.
I mean, you're true in that respect. The county has a gross budget of £1.3 billion. It's a tremendously powerful organisation, and if you know how and where to press the buttons, my golly, you can get change happening. Fabulous. Paul, what's your question?
What particular thing would you like to do as a county councillor if you were elected?
I imagine the most important ones being the squeaky wheel, you know, and shouting out for the community. Especially when you look around Sedgefield, and a lot of the communities are really lacking in community wealth, and they did have it at one point. It's been kind of sucked dry out of them. A lot of the miners and built up miners' welfare parks, and you know, built some really incredible community stuff, and that's been kind of squeezed out of our communities. So I'd like to get into the process of reclaiming these things back for the people. To bring infrastructure back to towns, and you know, put some life into places like Newton Aycliffe's town centre.
When you said squeaky wheel, what did you say? Squeaky wheel?
Yeah.
Explain the.
You don't know the squeaky wheel thing?
I don't have a clue. No.
A squeaky cog, squeaky wheel. You get the grease, you get the attention.
Right.
The nail that stands out gets hammered. That's another way of saying it, isn't it?
Yeah, good luck.
but is that a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's important that if you don't shout out over basically everything, you're just gonna look as if you do nothing. And there's already a lot of people who do nothing for us, so I don't think I want to be one of them.
I mean, I think that is just a fabulous thing, that basically you see the job as a county councillor as just being shouting really loudly in the right place on behalf of his community.
Educate, agitate, organise, yes. Let's do it.
Sam, what's your question?
I have a long-running joke with our Senko that I'm going to go to County Hall and chain myself to the railings to get an EHCP for my child. Like, that might scupper my chances of standing for anything. Yes, okay.
Can I just advise, sorry, Stuart, this is your moment, but can I advise you about changing sort of, if you're going to worry the councillors, you need to be able to chase them about. Sort of, if you chain yourself to the railings, they'll just give you a wide berth and you'll stand there on your own. Sort of chase them around with the chain. That'll be much more effective, I think.
Oh dear. I'll tell you told me to do that to her. My question is, what party campaigns or community campaigns have you been part of, Stuart?
Oh, long list. When I got started in the party, Paul sent me out with some leaflets for the last European elections. Since then, I've literally been involved with every piece of campaigning that the local party's done. I really enjoy door knocking, even though that's not going to be something we see for the foreseeable, which has kind of hurt me. Community work, I'm a prolific litter picker. I see stuff, I pick it up, I stick it in the bin. I don't generally through the lockdown, I haven't been out organising stuff because there's a whole host of things you got to get sorted. So I've been pushing that in other ways. I'm also an officer for my union branch. We've been doing a lot of campaigning around universal credit with the Universal Discredit campaign. I've supported workers in Newton Aycliffe when a certain factory had a certain COVID outbreak issue. I've done so much, literally, I fill pieces of paper and I forget most of it.
Absolutely brilliant. Paul?
Can I just say that one of the things I appreciated most about what Stuart's done over the last kind of 6 months is he took the initiative to ring our members to see if they were all right, COVID, and remember like how worried people were and how depressed people were. And he just rang them up and had a conversation with them and made their day better. That's a big deal, a huge deal. You don't know what impact that could have had. So on behalf of all of us, thanks, Stuart, for that, because that was absolutely brilliant.
I
worry about Stuart because he does it also quietly and unnoticed. You know what it says in the Bible? Don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. And sort of he's done all these wonderful things, but sort of I wonder whether enough people know about them. Bonnie, did you say you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I would like Stuart to come and move to Benfield side in Northwest Durham, where I live,
No.
so he could be my councillor.
No.
Oh. There's so many wards that want me. Clearly, you're all going to fight over me.
Can't have him. That's that.
Popcorn.
Stuart, God bless you. All the very best. And thank you for coming in to interview. Now, sort of, I'm not going to throw you out, however. You can stay in and be part of the dream team. And it's time for... Labour in fresh turmoil as Starmer refuses to restore the whip to Corbyn. Bonnie, do you want to put your head in the noose for this one?
Yeah, go on. I'll take the flak for this one. I know you talked about it in previous weeks very briefly. So there was the HRC report. If I've got those letters the wrong way around, I'm sorry. And Jeremy Corbyn made a statement and Keir Starmer didn't like it and suspended him. He was suspended for a little bit and then he went up, as per Labour Party rules, he went up in front of the NEC panel and was reinstated. And then Starmer withdrew the whip, which was a little bit strange because I used to be CLP Secretary of North West Durham, so I've got a reasonable grasp of the rules of the party. I was like, that doesn't make sense. So anyway, it's kind of descended into chaos, particularly over the past week. It looks like procedures haven't been followed. It's been political decisions made when it should be, suspensions and things should be neutral in any organisation, any membership organisation that has a rule book, like we have a rule book, and the Parliamentary Labour Party also has its own rules. Then they should be followed, and a suspension should be a neutral act, and it shouldn't be. The person suspended shouldn't find out from a press photographer for a start. They should find out in the correct and appropriate way. And it was clearly leaked from someone. I don't know who, so I'm not going to blame anyone. So anyway, there's a massive strength of feeling among the membership. There's been many, many motions put in at many constituency parties and branch party meetings, despite the fact that the General Secretary has said that we shouldn't be doing that. But the Parliamentary Labour Party and members of the NEC seem to be able to talk about it all of the time on national television, and that doesn't seem to be an issue, but everyday members can't. So the members aren't being held to the same rules as the members of the Parliamentary Labour Party and the NEC. That's a fact. I don't think I'm going to get into trouble for saying that. If I do, I do. And then today it's got really exciting as well, where there's been some other protocols and rules not followed, and some of the NEC members have walked out of an NEC meeting. So it's a mess. I'm calling it, in my head, I'm calling it the Starmer drama, because I don't know what's going to happen next. And to be honest, as a Labour Party activist, I think it's absolutely disgraceful that this is happening at a time that hundreds of people are dying every single day. And there's much bigger things to be worrying about than this, to be honest. It's an absolute disgrace. And I think the leadership of the party, whether that be Keir Starmer or the General Secretary, need to give their heads a shake and draw a line under it and get it sorted out as a priority so we can get back on with trying to stop the Tories making all of these terrible decisions and holding them to account, because at the end of the day, members of the public are dying every single day, and this is an absolute disgrace what's going on. It's so. I think that's kind of like, in a nutshell, what's going on and my feelings on it.
Oh, you're muted, John.
Who muted me? Who muted me? It was you, wasn't it? But I don't think you've set a foot wrong there, Vonnie. Thank you. Sam, the question sort of, do you think that the leadership are doing this intentionally, or do you think that they're just being reactive? And is this a plan, or a sort of? I'm trying to get at the motivations of the leadership. What do you think is going on here?
Yeah, and apologies if you can hear my washing machine, but this is real life. What sticks in my sort of the back of my head, and bearing in mind I am I'm acting CLP chair, so I understand the ins and outs, and I know I'm building bridges between members all the time in what I do. And I believe that's really important. Keir Starmer stood on a platform of uniting the party. So you know, he's set that as his own target, and he's not doing it very well. We're losing. I think the reports are is it 25 members a day or 250,000 members or something ridiculous like that. We've lost a lot of members. I don't know how much it is. Google it.
57,000.
57.
250 a day since he
Yeah,
became leader.
I totally
That was where you're coming from, yeah.
Those numbers by an order of 10, 250 members a day, and I know that, and I'm seeing the resignations coming through, and I'm getting the thing come through, the email come through, and I'm seeing my friends' names on there, and it is really, really difficult. So that was his target. He set himself, and he has failed because good members are leaving because of his actions, right? And the other thing is, he's consistently recently sort of blamed Jeremy Corbyn for how the media treated him, and now that it's happening again, like I'm seeing lots of members saying, oh, I wish the media would stop perpetuating this story about infighting in the Labour Party. It's like, well, okay, so if that was Jeremy Corbyn's problem when he was the leader, it's your problem now. You're the leader. So I am hugely disappointed because, you know, I was at that hustings in Newcastle where he spoke very genuinely about trying to bring the party together, and that he would have Rebecca Long-Bailey in his shadow cabinet, and that was a very shortly lived promise for whatever reason. You know, obviously I don't oppose removing people for genuine anti-Semitism. So yeah, it is just really disappointing. And from my position, you know, we've just been talking about our elections next year. We're not going to have anybody to deliver the leaflets, and people should not feel like their only purpose in the party is to deliver leaflets. We need people should have a voice. Our party is strengthened by its internal debate. We can't keep shutting it down at every opportunity.
Thank you, Sam. God bless you. Paul, this isn't about anti-Semitism anymore, is it? This is about sort of quite arcane things like rules and procedures. I mean, are you able to talk to enlightened people about what rules and procedures have been broken or are claimed to have been broken, and sort of what the reaction of all the various people is? I mean, are you able to do that?
Yeah. Well, I think the best thing I can do is there's a video on YouTube that people could look at called From Labour Grassroots with Howard Beckett, who is a solicitor, who detailed every single step of the way. Basically, there doesn't seem to be a rule that Jeremy Corbyn has broken. So that's why the NEC, which was balanced, apparently with some people who were Keir Starmer people and some people who were perceived to be Corbyn's people and some people who were perceived to be one person who seemed to be balanced. And we heard that they made a unanimous decision. I'm not sure whether or not that's true or whether that's a false leak. A unanimous decision to readmit Jeremy Corbyn into the party because the legal advice was he hadn't broken any Labour Party rules. And if you think about what he's been accused of, no one really knows, but it seems to be based around a sentence where he said that while anti-Semitism was a real problem in the Labour Party, the scale of it, which is protected within the AHRC report, there is a line in there saying people are within their rights to question the scale of it within the Labour Party, has been exaggerated by political opponents. Now, if
going
you
back
think
to that,
about
Paul, just going back to that, so to be fair, Keir Starmer that very morning had said, and we're not even going to question this. And sort of, so when Jeremy Corbyn said that, he was absolutely in line with what the EHRC report said, but he was absolutely out of kilter with what the leader was doing. Are you saying that there's no rule which says that you have to agree with the leader at all times? I mean,
of course there's not. Of course there's not. And if you follow me on Twitter, I retweeted a video of a certain Labour member saying that Jeremy Corbyn had been under unprecedented attack and unprecedented smears and so on. And that certain person was Keir Starmer during the Labour leadership hustings. So he thinks that these, like, he didn't mention anti-Semitism directly, but he thinks that Corbyn has been unfairly smeared in his time as leader. Now, if you had someone on LBC, somebody claimed that Jeremy Corbyn was going to reopen Auschwitz. Now, if you what they want him to say now, Nick Brown, the chief whip, has asked him to retract the statement and say that there has been no exaggeration. At no time has there been any exaggeration. Well, that's just not true, is it? Like there was some, and it might have been a totally inappropriate time to have mentioned that. You know, he's mentioned it before; it's on record. Loads of people know that those things are that those things have been exaggerated in the past, and maybe he shouldn't have said that at the time. But do we go around saying actually what we should do is admit that something that is true is false? Should we do that? It's a really, really weird thing to ask someone to do, and I can't get my head around it, to be honest. I think it's bizarre, and I think it's very strange the way people talk about factional disputes, and every time they mention factional, it's like, oh yes, it's factional, the bloody left. And it's like, well, there's a right faction as well, and the right faction fought every single day. Like, say for example, Peter Mandelson said, I fight every single day to undermine Jeremy Corbyn, and he said that. And you know, Peter Mandelson, friend of so I'll not mention Jeffrey Epstein.
And I interrupted and sort of and I'm sorry it's rude. Please forgive me, but we are running out of time. I got another topic to get. Stuart, what's the solution?
Time machine, go back, make better decisions. It's clearly. I think the healthy thing now is to get a decent resolution based on the actual protocols we have in place in the party, get that sorted quickly, and move back onto the actual job of, you know, protecting people and fighting the Tories.
Right, follow the rules. Spot on, Stuart. I'm going to move on just very shortly, people. We've got 7 minutes and there's 4 of you. All right. It's basically a version of just a minute. The last one, and this is the biggest of all for me, the PPE contract corruption scandal is just awesome, and nobody seems to give a damn. Paul, tell us all about it.
See, this is really linked to our first topic. So ideologically, they want to give all of the public money. So like governments create money, and then that can go anywhere. That can go to the people, or it can go to big corporations. And in this case, it is absolutely laid bare because of people paying more attention. So you've got George Monbiot. I know someone else will mention the other main character in this who's really exposed so much corruption. But basically, the Tories have been given out contracts to people with political connections, and we've mentioned this on the show before. They've been given out massive hundreds of millions of pounds worth of contracts to people who do pest control, who had a little website called Pigeon Be Gone or something like that, and they got hundreds of millions in coronavirus contracts for supplying PPE, and we see this level of corruption. And really, I think the Labour Party have failed to push for this because it's been going on for 6 months. They've barely mentioned it. I've been mentioning it for 6 months.
Jeremy Corbyn, carry on.
Yeah, they are busy doing that, but also came out like in Prime Minister's questions. One Labour MP, the shadow, what was it, Chancellor for the Duchy of Lancaster, whatever it's called, that strange named one. I think it's Rachel Reeves, had been lobbying for a football agent to get massive PPE contracts. So maybe this is, I don't know why we're not going for these things. I don't know why we aren't holding the government to account and expecting value for money, because what they will always say, it's taxpayers' money. That's again, an economic nonsense, but they will say this is like your money, public money. And I would agree with that. And they're spending it on just giving people masses and masses of money. I mentioned the 708 million pounds on 13 million pounds worth of hazmat suits a couple of weeks ago. You know, these sums are astronomical. The companies are not equipped to deliver on this at all. And yet here we are. They're getting massive, massive contracts. They've got links to the Tory party. And the person who will investigate these corrupt links will be Dido Harden's husband.
God bless you, Paul. Stuart, apart from just the cry of outrage, I mean, what can be done about this?
I don't know. I mean, everybody's shouting out about it. If the saying is love is blind, corruption is deaf and well fed, if you meant Matt Hancock.
Thank you. Vonnie, why do you think people aren't parading in the streets about it?
I have absolutely no idea, apart from the fact that we've got a global pandemic and we're all supposed to stay at home. I genuinely, I don't think this level of corruption's new. I just think it's always been hidden from public view. And I you know, otherwise, why would we have so many billionaires taking money out of the economy and hiding it in tax havens? You know, the Panama Papers, the Cayman, you know, they've been around for years. They're not new. I just think, I genuinely don't know why there is such a level of apathy in the country, in the opposition parties, to not. This should be, even in Thatcher's time, people would have lost their jobs over this. People would have ended their careers. It would have been career ending, all of this, for people if this came into the public eye. But however, it's not. It's there and it's brazen, and it's like they're all proud of the amount of corruption and the amount that they're taking out of the economy. I can't work it out. It's disgusting. It is entirely a capitalist problem. You know, this is what happens in capitalism. Money flows up, but they're not even pretending that they're not doing it. And that's the bit that I can't get my head around. It's kind of open. It's open corruption. And I don't know why the people who voted for the Tory party aren't up in arms. You know, the regular people in Northwest Durham, in Sedgefield, in Bishop, aren't up in arms saying this isn't right. Because it clearly is not right. On no way, on any moral plane, could you say that this is right.
I mean, we're running out of time, Bonnie, but I mean, do you think that just from what you've said there, do you think there's a thing that sort of, if they can get to a point where everybody just accepts that this is what happens and the government gets away with it, then they can just carry on doing it? And so do you think there's we're going to be open about it and everybody will accept it and then we can just carry on doing it? Yeah,
pretty much. I think that kind of sums it up. I think that's where we're at.
I think it is. I mean, everything in the bullying and the whole lot. It's just kind of what we're doing as we please, and you can all, to quote Richard Holden, bugger off. Sam, last word on the topic, and just before we say goodbye.
What I want to say is the fact this is being covered in the Daily Mail, and you would expect the Daily Mail usually to be quite a Tory-friendly paper. So the two questions are, you know, does that spell the end for this government if their publishing friends are turning against them? But also, why are they doing it? Why?
Because they want somebody more right-wing. The Daily Mail regularly attacks, the Telegraph particularly, regularly attack the Tory government, and everybody thinks, oh, this is because the Tory government's out of line and they're being, but they're not being lefty at all. What they're saying is that this is an appalling right-wing. We want a fascist instead. And that's why that happened. Ladies and gentlemen, on that bombshell, I am going to say goodbye to you, and I'm going to say goodbye to my amazing team. Haven't they been brilliant tonight, as always? Paul, say goodbye.
See you later.
Stuart, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
Sam, say goodbye.
Bye-bye.
And Vanny, you've just been wonderful. Thank you so much for standing in. Thank you for joining us. You must come in again. And thank you for your boldness and honesty. Say goodbye.
Bye.
Right, now, what happens now is we don't go. We're going to play the music and we're going to spend, and this time it must be half an hour because I get into trouble. I say too much. So I'm going to sit there and keep my lip and we're going to look at your comments that hopefully you've been making as the show went on. So we're going to shut down for if you want to leave us now, goodbye. God bless. See you next week. Otherwise, come back. We'll have half an hour when Sam takes the lead and reads out your comments to us. God bless you all. Bye bye from me.
Keep the red flag flying here.